A train almost destroyed a town. I was the engineer behind the Crazy Eight's Runaway on May 15, 2001, in Northwest Ohio, an ordeal so traumatic it made me leave the job forever. Have you ever heard about the Crazy Eight's incident? I was the engineer behind that disaster, and whenever I think about that day, I feel both ashamed and sorry. Everything that happened was unintentional. I was living in Ohio at the time, and it was one of those rainy days, May 15, 2001. I was 35 years old then, and it was also my birthday. What hurts the most is that every time I blow out the candles on my cake, I can't help but remember the disaster I caused. I woke up early that morning as usual. My wife Lisa had prepared breakfast, and I kissed her like I always do, saying good morning. We sat down to eat together. "Baby, when are you going to the station today?" she asked kindly. "My shift starts around 2:30, dear," I replied. I looked at her and noticed she seemed upset. "Why do you look upset, honey?" I asked. "I thought you were free today, baby," she replied. "Well, does that matter to you?" I asked. "Don't you know?" she said with a mischievous smile. Suddenly, a few drops of carrot jam spilled on her clothes. "Oh, how clumsy I am," she laughed. She stood up, left the breakfast table, and went to our bedroom. I didn't think much of it. I figured she had something to do or maybe wanted to change her clothes. It was stirring my Nescafe when I heard loud happy birthday music. Lisa started singing along. "Happy birthday to you, happy birthday, my love." I could hear her, but I couldn't see her coming out of the room. I stood up and stared at the door, waiting for her to appear. Then she stepped out wearing a beautiful white dress, holding a little cake in her hands. The candles were shining brightly on the cake, and she had balloons in the other hand, still singing, "Happy birthday, John, I love you." I was bursting with excitement, my eyes filled with tears of joy, and she placed the cake on the breakfast table. "I wanted to celebrate your birthday tonight," she said. "I didn't know you had a trip today, babe. You know I have to work, and I couldn't manage to celebrate before you left the house." I hugged her tightly, thanking her, and we blew out the candles together. She snapped some selfies of us. It was around 8, and we were eating the cake together. "John?" she called, sounding so sweet. "Yes, love," I replied. "Don't you want your birthday gift, honey?" she asked, in that adorable way of hers. "How you treat me and your warm presence is the best gift I could ask for, babe." "But yeah, why not? I want my birthday gift." I laughed out loud in a playful way. She smiled kindly at me and slipped her hands into her pockets. I was expecting something small and simple, but then I saw a pink plastic thing in her hands. She shouted, "We're having a baby, John. You're a dad now, babe." I was on cloud 9. My heart was racing and my hands went cold as I stared at her. "Are you serious, Lisa? Is this really happening?" "Yes, John. We're a family now, babe," she said with a big smile. I grabbed the pregnancy test and looked at it. 2 lines. Yep, she was right. We were going to have a baby. I hugged her tightly, burying my face in her hair. It felt like I was lost in a heaven of flowers. I whispered, "Love you, my angel. Thank you for everything," and placed my hand on her stomach, gently touching it before kissing it. She looked at me kindly and said, "John, I have to leave. Please make sure everything's in order. I don't know what my boss will do if I'm late today. Last time he said he'd fire me. I'm so tired of this stupid job, John. I wish I had a remote job so I could be home more and spend time on myself, especially now that I'm pregnant. My doctor said I need more rest and shouldn't be doing heavy work every day." I held her hands tightly and said, "Tell your boss I won't be coming to work starting next month. I make enough to cover everything, Lisa. You can leave your job whenever you want. You know I really don't agree with you working there anyway. They don't pay you nearly enough. I'll talk to the manager at the station today, and if you want, I can ask him if there's any way he can offer you a remote position there." "I don't want to be jobless, John. I need a job. It'd be great if you can find a remote job with your manager if possible. I can do anything remotely. You know I'm talented enough." "I know, babe. I'll see you tomorrow." I won't be back tonight. I have a trip to Kenton like I told you. I'll miss you, Lisa. Thanks for today, baby, I said. Happy birthday again, John. Love you. See you tomorrow. She closed the door and left. The silence in the house was killing me. I put on some music, Janet Jackson's song, and sang along while I cleaned the house and the breakfast table. Oh, my girls at the party, look at that body. Shaking that thing like you never did see. Got a nice package, all right. Guess I'm gonna have to write it tonight. I was dancing and having a good time before my nightmare kicked in. I took a short nap, and by noon, I was up again. After a quick meditation, I lit a candle to relax, just trying to find some comfort and calm, not knowing what the future had in store for me. Around 1 p.m., I got ready, threw on my uniform and sprayed my favorite Acqua di Gio perfume before heading out. I got in my car and before starting it, texted Lisa. I'm leaving home, babe. Take care of yourself. I arrived around 2 p.m., greeted my colleagues and the manager. I wanted to talk to him about Lisa, but I decided to wait until after my trip. It was already getting late. Before leaving the station, the medical team did their usual checkup on me. They always run health tests for engineers before trips. I've never had a drink before a trip. I always make sure I'm good to go. The doctors gave me the green light to start my journey. I was taking a break before climbing into the cabin and grabbing a coffee. I looked over the checklist and the data for the train I was about to guide. It was the famous 8,888 locomotive, with 47 freight cars on the Walbridge-Kenton line. What was even crazier was that 22 of those cars were loaded with thousands of tons of a highly hazardous and combustible industrial chemical, molten phenol. This stuff is toxic and extremely flammable, and it can cause serious harm if it touches your skin or if you breathe it in. I started running through my tasks before setting the train in motion. First thing I checked was the braking system. Everything was good. Then I checked the switches and track, electrical and fuel systems, lights and warnings, wheels and tires, cargo status, and emergency preparedness. Did a full overall inspection. Everything was in order. I started pulling out of the station and sounded the horn continuously to signal our departure. Just seconds later, I noticed something. I saw a misaligned switch on the tracks ahead. This switch was at a junction, responsible for directing the train onto different tracks. Since the train was moving at a slow speed, I figured I had enough time to step off, fix the switch, and then climb back into the cabin. I'd done it a million times before without any issues, but I didn't realize the mistakes I was about to make that would lead to disaster. My mind was all over the place at that moment, thinking about Lisa, about our baby, about her insecurity with her current job. I was kicking myself for not talking to the manager about her already. Why had I put it off until tomorrow? While I was lost in those thoughts, I was also focused on setting the brakes and switches. Unfortunately, I made a mistake. I set the wrong brake. I should have used the one that locks all the cars in place, but instead I hit the one that only locks a few cars. But that wasn't my only mistake. When I switched that brake, I also accidentally disabled the deadman switch. The deadman switch is a safety feature designed to automatically stop the train if the engineer loses control or something happens to them, like if they pass out or leave the train. The idea is that the system should kick in and bring the train to a stop if needed. But because I accidentally disabled it, the safety mechanism failed, and the train kept moving uncontrollably. But none of this would have led to a disaster if I hadn't made one last, critical mistake. When I went to engage a special brake to slow the train down to a crawl, I accidentally set the engine to accelerate instead. So here I am, with a heavy freight train full of hazardous chemicals, only one working brake, which wasn't nearly enough to stop it, and me, distracted, lost in my thoughts, and the only one in control. I managed to get off the train and align the switch, but by the time I tried to climb back aboard, the locomotive had already started speeding up. I was running alongside it, completely confused about why it was accelerating instead of slowing down. I grabbed one of the bars tightly, but my heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was in my throat, not my chest. I was soaking wet from running, stressed out and struggling to keep up. The wind was whipping past me, and before I knew it, I was being thrown off. My clothes got caught on the bar of the train, and I was barely able to hold on. My hands and legs were being dragged over rocks, dirt, and metal, and my skin was getting scraped badly, leaving me covered in blood. I tried to tear my clothes free from the train and finally managed to do it. The train dragged me for about 80 feet, 25 meters, before it finally dropped me on the ground and rolled out of the yard, starting its 65-mile, 105 km journey. I was badly hurt, my body aching all over and covered in blood, but somehow I was mostly unscathed. I stumbled forward, taking one step, then falling to the ground, trying to make my way back to the station. I'd left my phone in the cabin, and now the train was without a driver. I was crying, talking to myself like a child. What have I done? Do you even know what was in those cars, John? This could ruin the whole town. Why the hell did the train accelerate? I had no idea what I'd messed up with the brakes and switches before leaving. When I finally got to the station, I saw it was packed. People were shouting that 8,888 was out of control, telling others to stop it at all costs. That's when I realized. The train had already reached the next station, and the operators saw it running without anyone in the cabin. I rushed into the manager's office, and he just stared at me, asking, "What the hell happened to the train, John? Why'd you leave it?" I was frozen. The train was running south at 51 miles per hour, 82 kph, with no one in control. The manager immediately called all the authorities for help, letting them know about the runaway. And then, here's what happened next. They tried to stop the train with a portable derailleur, but the train was just too fast. And that didn't work. Then the police took matters into their own hands, trying to shoot at the emergency switch to cut off the fuel supply. But that didn't work either. The switch was designed to need a few seconds of pressure before the fuel-starved engine would shut down, and they couldn't hold it down long enough. By this point, nearly every station knew about the disaster, and everyone was scrambling to figure out how to stop the runaway train. Finally, dispatchers and engineers came up with a brilliant idea. The plan was for locomotive 1839 to lie in wait, ready to intercept 1839. 2 crew members were on board, engineers Jess Knowlton and Terry Forson. As soon as they saw the runaways speeding toward them, the chase was on. Luckily, Knowlton and Forson managed to couple onto the rear car of the freight train and started slowing it down. When the speed of the runaway dropped to 11 mph, engineer John Hosfeld, who had been waiting up ahead, was able to climb into the cab and shut down the engine. It later turned out that the heat and friction from the whole trip had completely destroyed the brakes on 8,881. Even though the whole incident scared the hell out of everyone involved, and the public too, it ended well in the end. When the crazy train finally stopped, everyone at all the stations was overjoyed, and our station was filled with cheers and clapping. We were all so relieved, and I even hugged my manager. I could tell he understood that the mistake was unintentional. Later, we analyzed the brakes and switches and figured out what had happened. It all came down to my mistakes. I felt awful about it. That's when I told my manager I wanted to resign. I couldn't handle the shame, the stress, and the pressure anymore. I was about to become a dad, and on top of that, I had failed to help Lisa with her job situation. I had to leave. My manager tried to convince me to stay, but I just couldn't. They called an ambulance, and I was in the hospital for 3 days, recovering from my injuries and body aches. When Lisa came to visit, she didn't criticize or insult me. She just said it was all an accident. Months later, she gave birth to our son, and now he's 23. I left my job a long time ago, but every year on my birthday, I still think about that day. I wish I could forget it, but it's just something that's always stuck with me. Maybe when I get Alzheimer's, I'll forget. Haha. I'm sharing this story because my son insisted I post it on social media. I'll be answering your comments and questions about my experience and the Crazy Eight story.